Mr. President, now we can make the summarize of some situation because the ISIS is almost defeated, Damascus is almost safe, and it's under control of governmental forces. And so far you have some operation in the south and on the east. Could you tell me now, as a president by career and as a doctor by education, what was it? How you could miss the first symptoms of this war, first symptoms of this invasion to your country, because you call it invasion. What was it?
Yeah. We have to differentiate between the internal symptoms and the external. The internal symptoms, we have problems like any other society in our region. We are part of this region. And we always discuss this problem. Maybe we were short of solving the problem that we could have solved before the war. Maybe not. This is subjective to every Syrian, could see it from his different point of view. While if you want to talk about the external factor, which is very important in creating this war, because no other country in this region have similar war, although you have the same societies, and you have worse problems like in the Gulf states, where you have no freedom at all, either to women or to people, to anything. So if that's the reason, for example, because that was the slogan at the very beginning, why didn't it start in those countries? So actually what happened, it wasn't internal, because the same problem have them for decades now, some of them for centuries. So actually this is where the external factor, that it wasn't clear, because we didn't see it, actually, because the plan hasn't been made in Syria. It was made in some Western country like US, France, and UK mainly. Some other satellite states like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, they were planning and they were sending money at the very beginning after they failed in creating, let's say, spontaneous revolution. This is where they started sending money, and this is where the problem started. That was clear for us from the very beginning, but maybe we couldn't control it.
But why didn't you see, for example, when I came to Eastern Ghouta a month ago, I've seen the tunnels everywhere, which were constructed by the engineers, by huge machines, by bulldozers. How you could miss it? Do you have explanation now how they managed to do these underground cities?
Yeah, of course they could have used the tools that they already have in that area, whether stolen from the government, from private companies and so on. And they had support coming from Jordan, through the desert directly to Al-Ghouta, where the desert is empty, no one can control it or observe it. And we don't have, of course, the means like satellites and so on to see all this. At the same time, when they started digging under the cities, something you cannot see.
When I came to Eastern Ghouta, I met the people who could prove by themselves that they've seen how al-Nusra showed the chemical weapon to their areas. I've seen all these chemical suits in rooms where were the headquarters of al-Nusra, and so on. But West tells that you poison your own people with a chemical weapon. Why is that? Yeah. Why nobody is listening to the people, and why West is so insistent in that?
Because the chemical narrative is part of their main narrative against the government in Syria. But they use it only when their troops, their proxies, the terrorists, been defeated in Syria in certain areas. They use this story or this narrative in order to have a pretext to intervene directly, militarily, and to attack the Syrian army. That's what happened many times. And every time they use this story, it's only when their proxies, the terrorists, been defeated. It should be, I mean, logically, let alone the reality that we don't have any chemical weapons anyway. We gave
you
them
don't
up.
have at all?
We don't have, no. Since 2013, we don't have. But put this aside, even if you have it, you should be using those weapons at least if you are being defeated, not when you win the war. And actually every time we are winning, they use it. So this is again the logic, but this is used as pretext in order to support the terrorists in Syria.
Is there any way to prevent all these provocations? Because our Russian Ministry of Defense tells that one of these provocations is to be prepared in their resort, and they told it recently. How to stop this?
You cannot, because this is not as a result of our reality. This is the result of their imagination, of their media. This is something created in their own media in their own countries, and then spread all over the world in the internet or in different media outlets. So you cannot prevent the provocation. The American only tell lies, and they attack right away. When you don't have international law to be respected, when you don't have effective United Nations institutions, you cannot talk about preventing provocations, because this is a jungle now, all over the world.
You are winning. You control the most part of the country already. But so many players are in Syria. So many parts, they have interest. Americans make negotiations with Turkey about Manbij. Israelis make negotiations somewhere. The Iranians make negotiations. Kurds, they have their own interests. How to solve it all? How to keep Syria united? Because nowadays it seems like Syria is teased apart. How to stop this? Because you told your main logo is like one Syria for one nation.
Yeah. If you want to talk about Syria being torn apart, this is about the let's say the geography, not about the society. The society is unified, so we don't have problem regarding this. So we can look at Syria as unified as long as the people are unified. Being torn apart, this is occupation. Different part of Syria being occupied by the terrorists with the support of the West, mainly the United States and their allies. So if we want to talk about the future of Syria, we don't take them into account. Talk about the political processes. This is going to be only Syrian political process. We don't take into account the interests of any other country regarding something which is internal. If you talk about the war, it's becoming now an international war, because that's how it started. Actually, it wasn't only about the government in Syria. The government in Syria is independent. We have good relations with Russia, with China and other countries. And the United States wanted to redraw the map of the world politically and maybe militarily. So Syria was one of the main battlefields to redraw this map, at least in the Middle East. That's why when you talk about those interests, this is a fight between these powers. The main power, United States and their allies, supporting the terrorists, and the goal is to have hegemony, and the other power is Russia with its allies. Their aim is to fight the terrorism and to restore the international law.
But why Syria was selected for this game?
For many different reasons. Syria is part of the group of countries that they are considered as independent. Syria, Iran, North Korea, and now Russia as independent country. So the West doesn't accept any independent position. America doesn't accept any European independent position. And that's why you have problem in Russia with US, because you want it to be independent, and they don't accept you. Even if you're a great power or not, you cannot be independent. This is one reason. And we are a small country. How can we say no and yes? We have to say only yes. This is one reason. Second, geopolitics of Syria, the historic role of the Syrian society, although it's very small, but this is fault line, social fault line between the different sexes and ethnicities. And when you control this area, you could have controlled the rest of the Middle East. That's why the struggle on Syria started during the Pharaohs. And the first treaty in the world was 12 centuries before Christ, was between the Pharaoh and Hittites, coming from north and south. They fought regarding on Syria, and they signed the first treaty in history. So the geopolitics of Syria is very important. So controlling Syria was a goal to the great powers since that time till this moment. So it doesn't matter whether Syria is big or small, or bigger or smaller. It's important.
What do you expect from Russia in this case? Because you have so many players whom you told should leave Syria. You told that Syrian nation one day will ask everybody to leave this ground. Yeah. What do you expect from Russia in this case? Because we are allies, we are friends. And
friendship is long-term issue between Syria and Russia for 6 decades. But we signed the treaty, the military treaty is for more than 4 decades. So we have 2 reasons. The first one, Syria and Russia have interest in fighting and defeating terrorism in Syria and Russia, anywhere in the world. So this is the first expectation and goal. The second one is the long-term one. Russia is very important for the global balance that we've lost in the collapse of the Soviet Union. So having Russia being here militarily and politically in Syria and in the Middle East and in the rest of the world is very important for the balance. It's not only important for Russia itself and for the other great powers, it's very important for smaller countries like Syria to have this balance. So that's what we expect from Russia on both levels, fighting terrorism and having a global balance.
I've been to Eastern Ghouta and I've seen how strongly it's destroyed, how hardly it's destroyed. And as far as I know, you need $400 billion to restore the country. But West tells that they will not give a dime while you are in power. What can you do in this situation? Because you have to restore the whole country.
Frankly, this is the best statement during the war, best Western statement during the war, that they won't be part of reconstruction in Syria. Because very simply, we won't allow them to be part of it. Whether they come with money, without money, whether they came with loan or with donation, with the grant, whatever. We don't need the West. The West is not honest at all. They don't give, they only take. First of all, we didn't build Syria through history by foreign money. We built it with our money, with our human resources. We still, in spite of the war, we still have the human resources to rebuild every sector in our country. We're not worried about that. Regarding the money, before the war, we didn't have any debt because we built our country with loans, some loans from our friends. So we don't have money. You can have loans from your friends. You can have money from Syrians living abroad, Syrians living inside, and the money of the government. So we're not worried about that. It may take a longer time, but we're not worried at all about rebuilding Syria. Don't forget that reconstruction after the war, when you talk about 400 billion, less or more, this is approximate, is a whole economy. It's a whole market. It's a whole investment. So the Europeans talking about coming for reconstruction, they're not coming to help Syria. They're coming to get money. And many European companies now are making contacts with us to open the door for them to come and invest in Syria.
I mean in private, yeah.
In private, of course. But of course, with the support of their government. So they need this market. They are in a very dire situation economically since 2008, most of the European countries. They need many markets. Syria is one of them. And we're not going to allow them to be part of this market, very simply.
When we're talking about the restoration of the whole country, means the restoration of trust and friendship between people, because we consider it partly as a civil war when the brother shoots to the brother because of the different religious or any other views. In this case, you start with Constitutional Committee. Opposition made their list for Constitutional Committee. Will you run for the next president's time, or how to restore this political structure of your country?
First of all, we don't have civil war, because civil war should be based on sectarian lines, ethnical lines, religious lines and so on. We don't have it in Syria. You can go everywhere, especially in the areas under the control of the government, where you can see the full spectrum of the rich Syrian societies existed and people living together. Actually, and this is not exaggeration, this is fact, the war was a very important lesson. So this diverse society is becoming much more unified than before the war because we learned the lesson. While if you go to the areas under the control of the terrorists, they don't represent one color of this society. Actually, they only reflect their incubator and the people who doesn't have any other choice but to live in those areas. They don't have any other choice. So we don't have worry about the civil war. So it's not people shooting each other. These are mercenaries. These are terrorists. You have terrorists in your country, in Russia, and they are Russian, but they don't represent part of the society. They represent their own ideology. So the same situation in Syria. So regarding the unification of the people, we don't have problem with that. Regarding the presidency, it has two factors. The first one, my will, and my will would be based on the second factor, which is the will of the Syrian people. We still have 3 years time. That time, in 2021, will the Syrian people be ready to accept that person, that president, or not? If no, what do I get with the presidency? I cannot do anything. I cannot succeed. I cannot give my country anything. So the answer will be no. If yes, that time I'm going to think about it, but still early. We still have 3 years till that time.
But what about all these constitutional reforms which were asked by United Nations?
We made reform in 2012, and now we have the Sochi conference. They're going to discuss it. Any constitutional reform is not related to the president, it's not related to the government, it's related to the Syrian people. So there must be, if we're going to go in any kind of amendment or change or whatever, it's going to be through referendum, national referendum. If there's national referendum and the people will support a new constitutions, of course we're going to do it. But this is not related to the will of the United Nations or to the foreign countries. It's not. This is going to be fully Syrian. If the Syrian doesn't want any change, there will be no change whatsoever.
One of the main players is United States. And Trump made his meeting in Singapore with Kim. Recently, Iran told that we will never meet with Trump because Kim is not Muslim. He doesn't understand what's going on. We'll never talk to Trump ever. Will you, if it will be necessary, meet Trump directly or indirectly? Do you think that it's necessary for you to talk to Trump?
We believe that discussing or talking or negotiating with your adversary, and any other one, of course, is productive. But in this case, it's always, since we had the first negotiations with the United States in 1974, we never achieved anything in any subject. The problem with the American president that they are hostages to their lobbies, to the mainstream media, to the huge corporations, financial, oil, armaments, etc. So they can tell you whatever you want to hear, but they will do the opposite. And this is the case, and it's getting worse and worse, and Trump is a very stark example. So talking and discussing with the American now for no reason, without achieving anything, it's just a waste of time. We're not happy to talk with the Americans just because they are American. We are ready to discuss with anyone who could be productive, and we don't believe that the American politics will be different in the foreseeable future. So it's just, again, waste of time now.
Every time I'm thinking about Syria, I remember that you are a doctor by career, that you lived in London for a long time, you've been integrated to that society, and now that society considers you as like a symbol of evil on the earth. And everyone tells there, like in the newspapers and politicians, that you poison people with a chemical weapon, you do all this awful stuff to your own citizens. How you feel about this? Or does it make any pressure for you emotionally, and to you and to your family? How you explain them what's going on?
Actually, emotionally, we live with the disaster in Syria for 7 years. So when you have bigger disaster, you won't feel smaller pressure. You don't. I mean, every blood that is being let on daily basis from a single Syrian person will create much, much more emotion than their fake narrative. This first. Second, when you know that they are lying, you don't feel anything emotional. You could feel something when there's credible criticizing based on facts and convincing stories, let's say. This is where you can, where we can feel, let's say, some pain or emotional pressure and so on. The problem with the way that they don't have statesmen anymore. The substitute of statesmen and real politics is fake politics, and fake politics needs fake stories, and chemical stories is part of these fake stories. Actually, the Western politics, and I'm not talking about the people, only the politicians, they have no morals at all. They have no values at all. So when you deal with people without value, without morals, they don't incite anything in your heart or in your brain or in your mind.
And the last question probably is that every time we come to Western Ghouta, we see the signs left by ISIS or al-Nusra, we will return. For us, it's scary because we spent a lot of money, we lost a lot of lives supporting Syria in her struggle with caliphate. So for us, it's scary that one day it can return. What's your estimation?
First of all, this is ideology. This is dark ideology was promoted for the last nearly five decades, because it started in the late 60s It's not only in the 90s or after, around the world, mainly by the Saudi Wahhabis. And of course, with the support of the United States and the West in general. So this is religious danger with political support. So it's both. So it's not something spontaneous. They will return, of course, because they're going to be used again and again by the Western power, but maybe under different brands. Those power was in Afghanistan 30 years ago, and Reagan called them holy fighters. He didn't call them terrorists. Now they are called terrorists, but they are using those terrorists. Maybe 10 years later, they're going to be used somewhere in this world under different brand. The same product, but they are rebranding this product. So it's a Western tool. That's why asking about feeling this tension is correct. This first. Second, you are right to feel this worry even in Russia, not because you lost life in Syria, because you have the same terrorism in Russia. How I look at it, if those terrorists succeeded in Russia, I will be in danger. They're going to come to Syria and to other countries, and vice versa. So you've been defending the Syrian, but you've been defending the Russians. So you paid the price in Syria in defending the Syrian, but you are defending the Russians as well. Because terrorism has no political borders. For them, it's one battlefield from Russia to Syria, maybe to Indonesia, and maybe to Morocco on the Atlantic oceans.
How you can stop the occupation in northern Syria because of this agreement between America and Turkey, one which is Syrian soil?
Yeah. We adopted two ways. The first one, and the main one, was the reconciliation. It succeeded. This is how we could have brought those areas back to their normality, where the people live a normal life, and the government is controlling the life of the people through the institutions. The other one is attacking the terrorists. Whenever they don't give up and join the reconciliation, we're going to attack them and take control by force, which is not our favorable way, but is the only way to gain control of the country.
But they separated the parts. They divided it between themselves. I mean, Americans and Turkey, they consider it like the territory which controls the...
No, don't believe. America control everything. Control Turkey, and America sent Turkey, and America prevented Turkey 5 years ago when Erdogan wanted to invade Syria 5 years ago, and they told him no. Why? Because at that time the terrorists were succeeding, were expanding. So why do we need Erdogan? When terrorists started retreating, they told Erdogan, now you can interfere because it's getting better for the Syrian, for the Russian, and for this group and Iran and the group who are fighting terrorists. So you'd better interfere just to make it messy again. And that's what's happening. But all these areas are under the control of the United States, nobody else.
That's why they make such a strong pressure on Iran, you mean?
Exactly, for different reasons. But at the end, they control ISIS in the east, and they supported ISIS in the east. They supported al-Nusra in Idlib in northwest, and they supported al-Nusra and ISIS and other factions in the south, the Americans. But they assign different roles to different countries. Sometimes they ask the Turks, sometimes they ask the Saudis, sometimes the Qatari, and so on. But all those countries, including the French and the British, all of them are American puppets and satellites, to be very simple and clear.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.